She was born the richest baby in America. Newspapers across the country wrote about her birth like it was a national event, because in a way, it was. By the time she died, 66 years old, alone in a hotel room, she had less than $3,500 left to her name, 7 marriages, a $1 billion inheritance, and a nickname that followed her from the age of 21 until the day she died. Poor little rich girl. Stick with me, because this is one of those stories where every single decade of her life gets stranger than the one before it. And by the end, you're going to look at the phrase, "money can't buy happiness," completely differently. Let's start at the very beginning, because to understand how staggering this fortune actually was, you need to understand the man who built it. Frank Woolworth did not come from money. He grew up on a farm in upstate New York in the 1850s, the kind of childhood where new shoes were a luxury. And by his early 20s, he was working as an unpaid store clerk just to learn the retail trade. In 1878, he tried opening his own store with borrowed money, and it failed within months. Most people would have stopped there. Instead, in 1879, he tried again with a radical idea nobody believed in. A store where every single item cost 5 cents, and later, a store where nothing cost more than a dime. Investors laughed at him. Retailers at the time built their businesses around wealthy customers, high margins, and exclusivity. Woolworth's idea was the opposite: sell to everyone, take a small profit on each item, and make it up in volume. It worked beyond anything he could have imagined. By the early 1900s, there were Woolworth 5 and dime stores on main streets in nearly every American town. By 1912, the year Barbara was born, the Woolworth Company was one of the largest retail operations on the planet. In 1913, Frank Woolworth built the Woolworth Building in Lower Manhattan, at the time, the tallest building in the entire world, and according to company legend, he paid for the entire 60-story tower in cash, just so nobody could say he owed a single bank a single dollar. That is the kind of empire Barbara Hutton was born into. Not just rich, legendary rich, American royalty rich. And yet, from almost the moment she was born, Barbara's life had a crack running straight through the middle of it. Her mother, Edna Woolworth, was Frank Woolworth's daughter, and by most accounts, she struggled for years with severe depression, something rarely discussed openly in the 1910s, let alone treated properly. When Barbara was only 4 years old, her mother died. The official cause was listed as appendicitis, but multiple biographers and even some family members over the years have said privately that it was suicide, and that Barbara, at 4 years old, was the one who found her mother's body. Whether or not you believe every detail of that story, one thing is undeniable: the loss shaped everything that came after. Barbara's father, Franklin Hutton, was a Wall Street stockbroker, and by every account he was far more comfortable managing his daughter's enormous trust fund than actually raising her. He remarried within a couple of years and essentially handed Barbara's upbringing over to a rotating cast of nannies, governesses, and relatives who shuttled her between mansions in New York, Long Island, and Europe. She had ponies, she had personal tutors, she had more dresses by age 10 than most women owned in a lifetime. And by her own later reflections, she couldn't remember a single moment growing up where she felt like anyone in the house genuinely wanted her there for who she was, rather than what she represented. She learned, long before she understood what money even meant, that the adults around her were being paid to smile at her. That lesson would define the rest of her life. Now fast forward to 1933, the single moment that turned Barbara Hutton from a private family name into a national symbol, whether she liked it or not. On her 21st birthday, under the terms of her trust, Barbara inherited $50 million outright. To put that in perspective, adjusted for inflation, that number today is well over $1 billion, handed directly to a 21-year-old with no restrictions. Here's the problem: 1933 was not just any year. It was the absolute floor of the Great Depression. Unemployment in the United States had climbed past 25%. Banks were collapsing by the hundreds. Families across the country were losing their homes, standing in bread lines, and watching entire life savings disappear overnight. And that same year, that exact year, Barbara Hutton threw a coming-out ball in London so extravagant that the cost of a single night reportedly exceeded what most American families would earn across several lifetimes combined. It wasn't just a party. It was practically a provocation. Newspapers ran photographs of the champagne towers and orchestras right next to headlines about soup kitchens. The backlash was instant, and it was brutal. That's the exact moment the press coined the nickname that would follow her for the rest of her life. Poor little rich girl. It was meant as mockery, the idea that a woman who had everything dared to be unhappy. Nobody in 1933 could have known just how tragically accurate that mocking little nickname would eventually become. So let's talk about the marriages, because honestly, this is where the story stops sounding like history and starts sounding like something you wouldn't believe if it were fiction. Barbara Hutton was married 7 times. 7. Let's go through them, because each one tells you something different about what she was actually searching for. Husband number 1, in 1933, was Prince Alexis Mdivani, a member of a minor Georgian noble family that had essentially turned marrying wealthy heiresses into a family business. His siblings did the exact same thing across Europe. Barbara reportedly transferred him close to $1 million as part of their marriage arrangement. Behind closed doors, by nearly every account from people close to her, Mdivani was cold, controlling, and at times physically abusive. The marriage collapsed within a few years, and Mdivani died shortly after in a car accident while reportedly wearing a watch Barbara had given him. Husband number 2, in 1935, was Count Kurt von Haugwitz-Reventlow, a Danish nobleman. This marriage produced Barbara's only child, a son named Lance, born in 1936. By most accounts, this relationship was also marked by cruelty, and Barbara later fought an exhausting, headline-dominating custody battle to protect her son from what she described as an unsafe environment. Reporters camped outside courtrooms for weeks. It was, by far, one of the most publicly humiliating chapters of her life, played out entirely in front of a country that had already decided she deserved whatever suffering came her way. Then, in 1942, came the marriage the public almost approved of. Barbara married Cary Grant. Yes, that Cary Grant, one of the biggest movie stars in the world. The press immediately nicknamed them Cash and Cary. And here's the twist people don't expect. By several accounts, including reflections from Grant himself later in life, this may have been the one marriage where genuine affection existed on both sides. Grant was already enormously wealthy and famous in his own right. He had no need for her money, and reportedly refused a prenuptial arrangement that would have benefited him financially, insisting instead on keeping their finances completely separate. For a while, it looked like Barbara might have actually found something real. But even this marriage ended in divorce after about 3 years. Grant's grounded Hollywood work ethic and Barbara's world of European aristocracy, all-night parties, and growing dependency on prescription medication simply didn't mix. After Cary Grant came husband number 4, a Lithuanian prince named Igor Trubetskoy, another marriage into fading European nobility that ended within a few years. Husband number 5 was the Dominican diplomat and legendary playboy Porfirio Rubirosa, a man famous across 3 continents specifically for marrying extraordinarily wealthy women. He would later marry into fortune again after Barbara. Then came 2 final marriages later in her life, both to European men with old titles and largely empty bank accounts, both ending the way nearly all the others had. Financial historians who've studied her estate records estimate that, on average, each divorce cost Barbara well over $1 million once you count settlements, properties, debts quietly paid off, and gifts along the way. Read that again. She wasn't simply unlucky in love 7 separate times. She was running what amounted to a decades-long transaction, paying again and again for the temporary appearance of being wanted. And that, honestly, is the emotional center of this entire story. Barbara Hutton was not reckless with money because she failed to understand its value. She understood its value better than almost anyone alive, because she'd watched it define every single relationship she'd ever had, starting with her own parents. What she was actually chasing, marriage after marriage, gift after gift, was something no fortune on earth has ever been able to purchase. To be wanted for who she was, completely separate from the Woolworth name attached to her bank account. People who knew her personally describe a woman who gave away staggering sums to people who barely knew her, tipping waiters and hotel staff amounts equivalent to a year's salary, quietly paying off the debts of friends and even strangers, funding the entire lifestyles of people who, by every outward appearance, treated her as little more than a wallet with a woman attached to it. Almost as if, deep down, she kept running the same test again and again, quietly hoping that just once, somebody would turn around and say, "I don't want your money, I just want you." Almost nobody ever did. And the ones who came close often left anyway, because loving someone that publicly wealthy came with a level of scrutiny and pressure most relationships simply can't survive. Underneath the marriages and the headlines was a battle the public rarely got to see clearly. Barbara struggled for most of her adult life with severe anorexia and addiction, amphetamines to get through her days, sedatives to get through her nights, alcohol to fill the space in between. And here's the part that makes it even more heartbreaking. The doctors around her, many of them, were reportedly more interested in retaining a spectacularly wealthy patient than in actually confronting the severity of her illness. Prescriptions came easily. Real intervention almost never did. By her final years, biographers describe a woman who weighed under 90 pounds, whose once famous beauty had been worn down by decades of physical and emotional exhaustion. In interviews from that era, she once told a reporter, almost offhandedly, that money was a bore. It's a sentence that sounds almost obscene coming from someone born into more wealth than most countries' royal families. But by the time she said those words, she had lived out the brutal truth behind them more painfully than almost anyone in modern American history. Her son, Lance, the one relationship many biographers believe was genuinely uncomplicated by money, became a race car driver and, later, an innovator in early motorsport technology. Their relationship had its own strains, shaped inevitably by the chaos of Barbara's life, but by most accounts it remained one of the few threads of authentic connection she held onto. Tragically, Lance died in a car crash in 1972, 7 years before Barbara herself passed away, one more loss in a life that seemed to collect them. In May of 1979, Barbara Hutton died alone in a hotel room in Beverly Hills. She was 66 years old. The fortune that had once made her, quite literally, one of the wealthiest women on the planet, a sum that adjusted for inflation would exceed $1 billion today, had dwindled, marriage by marriage, gift by gift, decade by decade, down to almost nothing. Her final estate was valued at roughly $3,500. 3 generations. A farm boy who built an empire out of nickels and dimes through sheer stubborn will. A son who mostly managed to hold that empire together. And a granddaughter who became one of the most extreme cautionary tales in American financial history, not simply because the money disappeared, but because of everything she gave up while chasing what the money could never actually buy her. There's an old saying about generational wealth that shows up again and again throughout history, across cultures, across centuries. The first generation builds the fortune, the second generation grows or maintains it, and the third generation loses it. It sounds almost too neat to be true, and yet Barbara Hutton's story lines up with it almost perfectly. But I don't think her story is really about money management at all. I think it's about something much simpler and much harder to fix. A little girl who lost her mother at 4 years old, who was taught by every adult around her that affection could be purchased, and who spent the rest of her life running an impossible experiment, testing person after person, hoping just once the answer would come back different. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Barbara Hutton had more money than almost anyone alive in her era. She had status, beauty, fame, access to every door in the world, and 7 marriages to some of the most eligible men on the planet. And by nearly every account from the people who actually knew her personally, she was one of the loneliest human beings alive. If a fortune that size, spent that deliberately, couldn't buy her even one honest, uncomplicated relationship, what does that actually tell us about what wealth can give a person, and more importantly, what it never ever will? If this story hit you the way it hit me while researching it, make sure you're subscribed, because every single week I'm digging into stories just like this one. The mansions old money families built, the fortunes they made, and the people who eventually lost every last bit of it. Drop a comment below and tell me whose story you want me to dig into next. And if you want more deep dives into forgotten fortunes like Barbara Hutton's, hit that like button so more people find this channel and this story doesn't stay forgotten either. I'll see you in the next one.